right, so welcome everyone. We're so excited to be here with you tonight. Welcome to St. Louis County Library's virtual program 2025 SLCL Staff Favorites. We're really excited to have you here with us. This is my favorite program of the year. So I am Sarah. I'm an adult services librarian here at St. Louis County Library. My specialty is Reader's Advisory, which is like matchmaking between readers and books. And yeah, we have a lot of great picks for you tonight. So we have, including myself, there'll be 12 different people presenting tonight, 12 different staff members from all sorts of different branches and departments around the library. And we'll each be talking about two of our favorite books that we read this year. So these aren't necessarily books that came out this year. They are books that we just read this year. And I always love this program because I like seeing what all of my coworkers read, and I like seeing if there's sort of a trend each year. We do have quite a lot of nonfiction this year, so I'm excited to talk about these. So a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. So tonight's program is in a webinar format, which means that your camera and microphone are not active, so no one can see or hear you, but hopefully you can see and hear us. If you can't, we suggest that you turn your volume up on your device, or that you leave the program, move a little bit closer to your Wi-Fi and rejoin the webinar, and that usually helps out. Tonight's program is being recorded and it will be posted on our YouTube channel, and I'll send out a follow-up email when that recording is ready. So these are tonight's presenters. So like myself, Sarah S. I work in adult services. I'm joined tonight by Harry, who also works in adult services Reader's Advisory, TC from the Bookmobiles Department, Sarah L. from the Bookmobiles Department, Sarah J. from the Saks branch, Kelsey from Cliff Cave, Jessica from Merrimack Valley, Catherine from Clark Family, Trista from Prairie Commons, Miriam from Saks, Angie from Acquisitions, and Kat from Mid-County. So like I said, all sorts of different places. And yes, there are 3 Sarahs. So all of tonight's titles are available through the library. You can get them either in print or e-media, depending on the title, through one of our different platforms. And there is going to be a handout that I will send in the follow-up email when the recording is ready. So no need to necessarily take notes or anything. We'll be sending everyone who registered a handout, and that handout you'll be able to click on the covers of each of the books, and it'll take you right to the catalog where you can place a hold. So that'll be coming with the follow-up email. And yes, hopefully there's going to be a little bit of time for questions at the end. So we do have the chat open. It's set only to go to us presenters, so no one else will see your question. And we'll save all of the questions till the end. But if you do have questions as we go along, put those in the chat and we'll answer them as time allows at the end. So with that, we will go ahead and get started. And I am our first presenter. So my favorite book of the year was Automatic Noodle by Annalee Newitz. And this is a cozy science fiction book that is set in a near future post-Civil War San Francisco, where society is just getting back on its feet, and there's still some tension with the rest of the United States. But like in any good cozy, that greater context is brought home to a very specific neighborhood and a very close-knit group of people, or in this case, robots. These robots used to run a kind of mediocre burger joint, but they were unceremoniously shut down when the restaurant abruptly closed due to shady financial dealings of the humans that owned the restaurant. And they are brought back online when the building has some minor flooding and their emergency protocols are activated. So yeah, and they realize kind of what has happened. So sentient robots do have some rights in California, but they don't have many economic freedoms, and many are indentured servants. So these robots are worried that if they don't get the restaurant back up and running and making a profit really soon, they're going to be sold off. However, they aren't really supposed to be running a business without human owners, so they create some kind of shell contracts to hide who they are, and they open and begin running the absolute best, yummiest noodle shop in all of San Francisco. That is until they get some resistance from some anti-robot activists. But the complaints, are they real or are they astroturf, like fake complaints created by outsiders with a nefarious purpose? And what are these robots willing to risk to stand up for their own self-determination and creative dreams? And I think a lot of people think that cozy fiction is just about the vibes, but I think it serves a much more important purpose. Their cozy fiction is basically a hope building technology. They take really big societal problems and battles of good and evil, and they bring them down to the level of neighbors and small businesses and community groups. And in this context, we are not hopeless and helpless against seemingly omnipotent rulers and faceless, systems. We can understand the motivations of our neighbors even when we don't agree with them, and we can affect change in the situations that we actually live in. And if this happens over and over, in every quilting bee, in every local university, and every noodle shop, then it can happen everywhere. So check out Automatic Noodle and be a part of that hope building process. All right. My next favorite pick this year was Piranesi by Susanna Clark. And I absolutely loved Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, which was Clark's first book. And I really liked her short story collection as well. But somehow I just never got around to reading Piranesi because it came out in 2020. So I think I just had other things on my mind when it came out. But, I think that you find the right book at the right time. And this book definitely resonated with me this year. It's about a man who lives in a mysterious building by the sea. And the building is made of almost infinite halls that have a number of very unusual statues in them. He is currently the only human resident, although he has a visitor that comes from time to time. And this book is about the narrator's journey to understanding who he really is and why he is there. I can't really give you more information than that without giving anything away. And the reading experience is really the journey in itself. I wish I could read this book again for the first time, honestly. I recently read why there was such a long gap between Clark's novels and how Piranesi came to be. So just after the successful launch of Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, she was actually struck with some very serious health issues that involved migraines and intense fatigue and brain fog, which made sustained writing like almost impossible for her. But over time, she began working on a new novel in really short bursts. And this eventually coalesced into Piranesi. So when you read the book, you can actually see how the narrator's journey reflects Clark's own personal creative process of confusion and discovery. So if you too missed Piranesi in 2020, or you've avoided it because you aren't really sure what it is about, I encourage you to dive into it without any kind of expectations, because you may be surprised at what you find there in yourself. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Harry. Take it away, Harry.
Thanks, Sarah. My first book, where's my video? My first book is Don't Tell Me How to Die by Marshall Karp. Maggie, a small town mayor, finds out that she has months to live. She has the same genetic disease that killed her mother. So she wants to find the perfect replacement wife for her family, her successful husband, and her children. Poor Maggie has been through this before. Her mother died when she was young, and Maggie hated her father's new wife. She remembers how all the women flocked around her newly widowed father and sought him out. Maggie was voted most likely to kill someone to get what she wants in high school, so she is an assertive lady. This author worked with James Patterson on the NYPD Red series. Now, this book, bear with me, the first half of the book is almost like a character study. You get a characterization of Maggie, her sister, her family, and also her backstory, what led her to this situation. Hang on, because the second half of the book, I was trying to think of a comparison. It's sort of like jumping in from like a small car into a Dodge Charger in the second half. The second half is so fast and so twisty with a shocking ending that you will be amazed. It's almost like Frida McFadden pushed aside Claire Lombardo and finished the book. Anyway, the audio version is highly recommended. However, I read the print version and enjoyed it very much. My second book is The Aviator and the Showman. And this is a nonfiction book about Amelia Earhart and her husband. I did not think it was going to be great. It was tremendous. As you probably know, Earhart disappeared during a 1937 flight and was declared dead in 1939. What we didn't know is that her husband was a relentless self promoter, cocky, careless, and somebody who later faked his own kidnapping. He was the one who decided to make Amelia Earhart the Lady Lindy. Amelia had another female flyer who was a competitor of hers. So her husband, George Putnam, who was the heir to a publishing fortune, Amelia was his second wife, decided to promote her for all she was worth. Now, Amelia, not a saint either, very cocky, careless. And was this a marriage of convenience or were they really a happy couple? I'll let you decide. But the author did a tremendous amount of research to write this book. And when you read about her final flight, which had been promoted by her husband, rights had been sold for the account of it, you will be surprised. I highly recommend the book. I've recommended it to people that have wanted non-historical, nonfiction for their book clubs, and I've gotten really good feedback. So those are my two picks, and I'm going to pass it over to TC.
Hi, everyone. Anna Lemke is a professor of psychology at Stanford University School of Medicine and chief of the Stanford Addiction Medicine Dual Diagnosis Clinic. And in her book, Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence, Dr. Lemke explores the relationship that our human bodies have with pleasure and pain, how the chemical dopamine controls that balance, and how the modern world, especially our electronic devices, have provided us sudden, from an evolutionary perspective, abundance of dopamine producing overconsumption and stimuli. But this isn't just a book about the science of dopamine. It's also a book about what tools we can all use to moderate our own overconsumption, to find a balance to live the kind of life we want to live. Dr. Lemke shares stories with permission from her clients, highlighting the tools and tactics that they use as they try to manage their addictions. The stories range from addictions that you might anticipate in a book like this, marijuana and alcohol. Some can be quite shocking. There is a sexual addiction that is described in some detail, so something to take note. But these stories provide both powerful insight into the nature of addiction and dopamine balance, as well as providing useful tools that we can all use to reduce or avoid our own dopamine-aided overconsumption. And my second book is Gretchen Rubin's Life in Five Senses: How Exploring the Senses Got Me Out of My Head and Into the World. This book was recommended to me by a friend because of my forest therapy practice. And what that basically means is I enjoy going into the forest or other nature spaces and engaging in a series of gentle and slow, mindful sensory awakening exercises, really experiencing the sights, the smells, of the natural world. And I was kind of intrigued by the idea in the book about, can you take a sensory mindfulness practice and incorporate it into everyday urban and suburban life, at home, at work? Um, and so Gretchen Rubin is a well-known podcast host. She's written some books on kind of happiness and the human condition. You might have heard of her New York Times bestseller, The Happiness Project. And she begins her quest to awaken her senses because she has a trip to the eye doctor, and she finds out that is at an increased risk for a detached retina and maybe down the road some damaged vision. And she kind of has an insight, oh my gosh, I have not really been like experiencing everything that sight has to offer. And oh, by the way, I haven't been experiencing what any of my senses have to offer. Kind of says she goes through life like I think a lot of people do. At least I feel like I do sometimes, kind of stuck in our head, I think it's something a lot of us can relate to. So She basically takes us on a ride. She explores a whole bunch of different, she goes on adventures. She really takes an entire year and says, I'm going to try to explore like what does opening my senses and exploring that look like. Some examples are she visits the Metropolitan Museum of Art every day for a year. By the way, that sounds amazing. Can I do that? She takes different classes, like, cooking classes or sculpting classes and a whole bunch of stuff like that. Also, little adventures with like her family, hunting for items of a certain color when shopping with the kids, having blind taste tests where it turns out ketchup, yeah, ketchup is in fact an incredibly complex flavor. And there's a whole bunch of other little things she does. It's a very uplifting book. It's very gentle and inspirational. She's taking us, as I said, kind of along for the ride as she explores things, and then she provides a little bit of insight as to the science of how and why it works. Very, very easy to understand for the layperson. It's also a great book if you yourself are like, oh, I want some ideas on how to maybe like experience my senses a little more. This book provides, will give you a whole bunch of ideas to get started on your own journey. So, and with that, I will pass it over to Sarah L.
All right. So my picks are very different from TC's. My first pick is a book that I was very excited to have released. If you are on TikTok at all, you might recognize the author from her TikTok series called Hell's Bells, and she took it into her own, and it's always been hers, but she took it and she wrote the origin story for the characters for that series. For Whom the Bell Tolls is a story about death that is surprisingly uplifting. It is about a young woman, Lily, and I think it is summed up best by the very first line of the book. The first line of the book is Lily knew the cancer was going to kill her when the car wouldn't start. It's just witty and humorous. It does deal with very heavy topics. There are some very spicy or steamy scenes in it. There's a lot of very intimate romance, but there's also very sweet moments. There's a sentient house, and it's a fun take on what the afterlife looks like. It's not going to be for everybody because it does ask questions about religion and how the afterlife works, and it is heavy, but it is a beautiful story that is really about hope and joy and found family that I highly recommend if it's something you think you could enjoy. I would look up trigger warnings before you read it, though. And then my next book is really more of a collection of short stories. It's We'll Prescribe You a Cat, and I'm going to do my best to pronounce her name. I believe it is Sayo Ishida, but I could be wrong. She's a Japanese author. It was originally written in Japanese. That does kind of show in the English translation. Sometimes it's a little bit clunky, but it's kind of unclear. It might be intentional, it might just be the way the translation was done. It's a little unclear whether it's supposed to be a little bit stilted or if it's supposed to, it just wasn't translated the best, but it still reads wonderfully. It is a collection of short stories. It's about five different people and cats they are prescribed. Um, it is technically a little bit of fantasy. There's just a little sprinkle of magic in it, but really it's mostly about different adventures that people go on. And they are sent to this clinic that is in this little back alley that you can't find unless you're supposed to be there. And everyone heard about it from their sisters, cousins, moms, grandma, or, their coworkers, brothers, friends, aunt. Like you just end up here. You don't really try to be here. And we follow five different adventures with five different people and more than five different cats. If you love cats, you'll love this. It's very sweet. The stories do overlap a little bit, but they are each their own individual story. So if you like short stories, this is a great one. If you like uplifting stories, this is a great one. And if you like slice of life stories, it's really great. I really loved this one. This was kind of a palate cleanser book for me, where it was just like I could read one of the stories in between other books. And I didn't have to sit and read just this book. Like I could just read one of the short stories and it was great. And then I could move on to something else or I could keep going. And that is my other book for this year. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah J.
Sarah. My first recommendation is The Road to Tender Hearts by Annie Hartnett. I read one of her other novels last year, Unlikely Animals, and I loved it. And I'm looking forward to reading the only book by her that I haven't read yet, Rabbit Cake. She only has the three books that I know of, but she is quickly becoming a favorite author. Her books put on full display just how messy and imperfect and unfair life can be, while simultaneously focusing on why we show up for the people in our lives, even if they let us down, even when they're frustrating, and how they will still show up knowing we are all those things as show up for us, knowing we are all those things as well. In this book, PJ is retired, has a drinking problem. He's divorced. He's estranged from his youngest daughter, and his oldest daughter died in her senior year. On the upside, everyone likes him. He's still great friends with his ex wife. His best friend is set to marry her, and he's asked PJ to be his best man. Pancakes is the orange cat that has been living at the local nursing home and was surrendered to the local shelter for being an agent of death. He has found his way into PJ's life for better or for worse. Sophie is PJ's youngest daughter, and they see each other on occasion, but things just haven't been the same since Kate, her older sister, drowned in a cranberry bog her senior year of high school. Luna and Ollie, both in fourth grade but not quite twins, are orphaned after their parents died in a murder-suicide. PJ is their grandfather's estranged brother, and the only relative listed as being able to take them in. This is the group that sets out on a road trip with two things in mind. Luna is convinced that her real dad is a soap star living in LA, and PJ has found out that his first love's husband just passed away and is convinced that he will find true love again if he can just see her again. So neither of them neither groups know that this group is on their way to see them. So the soap star dad doesn't know, and the first love doesn't know. While it sounds a little grim, it is laced with dark humor, humanity, love, understanding, and so much more. To say that I adored this book is an understatement. It's a look at how people can be so inherently flawed and yet so full of love with the ability to be loved by others. I cannot recommend that one enough. And for my next book, The Keeper of Magical Things, much more lighthearted than the last one, even though that one's pretty got a mix of lightheartedness. But this is The Keeper of Magical Things by Julie Leong. You can see there's a cat dragon there, so that's quite different, different type of world. Earlier in the year, I read Leong's Teller of Small Fortunes, enjoyed it immensely, and therefore was really looking forward to her second book. I was thinking it might be a sequel, but it isn't. So you can happily read one or the other without the pressure of starting a whole new series because it's completely different characters. This book had three of my favorite things. It's in the cozy fantasy genre, so low stakes. It's heavy on found family, one of my favorite tropes, and it's a sapphic romance, girls. I can't go wrong with any of those things, but all three in one book, that's almost bound to be a winner for me. Our main character is Certainty Bulrush. She's made the most of her minimal powers, but they have never been quite enough to make her a full-blown mage. However, that has not stopped her family from being supportive. She's also made a group of really good friends, and she's generally content aside from her wish to be a mage. Then there's Aurelia, practically perfect, brilliant, aloof, studious, and of course, she's already a mage. She has incredible focus, but she has run into some problems with her own magical abilities. Her family is less than supportive, and she's isolated herself from her peers. So practical opposites here. The two are tasked with transporting and organizing minimal magical artifacts to Spelling, a dull town that has no magic, with residents that are unimpressed with the magical guild. But if they are successful, Certainty will receive her magehood. Upon arrival, Certainty begins to realize that the artifacts might actually be beneficial to the town, like the one-time use wand that magics a swarm of bees to help the local apple orchard. If she can convince Aurelia of that fact and not cause any magical incidents, maybe they'll be able to convince the guild as well. This book is charming and fun. The love story develops slowly, and since it's a cozy, most love scenes are closed door or off page. Um, and with cozies, no matter what happens, there will almost be a guaranteed happy ending. So that's nice if you're looking, if you've had some rougher reads and you're looking for something that's a guaranteed happy ending no matter what, this will be the book for you. And I will hand it over to Kelsey.
Hi. So my first pick of 2025 is The Entanglement of Rival Wizards by Sarah Rash. It is your kind of classic, cozy, modern fantasy romance with a human main character and his love interest slash enemy, who is a half elf wizard at his grad school. It is your classic cinnamon roll meets grumpy, grumpy grouch man, but they're forced to work together and on the same project for their grad school research. And it's like if they don't, they'll lose the grant. So it's a huge deal that they got this. And forced proximity, have to get along kind of story. I really enjoyed the way that Rash adds dimension to her characters. For example, Sebastian is the human wizard. He is a sweet but pretty mischievous character. But throughout the story, he has a lot of growing to do. And as you find out more about his backstory, you kind of see why he acts out the way he does. We also get to see that from Elthior, who is the half elf wizard, and kind of see why he's the grouch throughout the story. But it's very cute, very cozy, little bit of spice. So heads up if that's what you're looking for. And throughout the story, it's just great because you can also see why Elthior is the way he is, but you also get to see him develop into being a sweet character who also can be really vulnerable. But it's not just about the two of them. There are some great side characters, including Sebastian's best friend and roommate, Auroch, who is a half orc. He is a great foil to Sebastian's antics and kind of a little bit the voice of reason, but usually gets dragged into the chaos. So that's always fun to read. And it's just it's a nice romance that focuses on the characters actually developing like a healthy communication and talking with each other throughout the story, and having priorities outside of their romance, which sometimes doesn't happen in romance. So it's really fun to see. I personally am a huge audiobook reader. So I will say Sam Stark, who's the narrator for this one, does a great job. Keeps all the characters it's kind of separate with his voices, but also like does a good job with them. Makes Elthior is kind of the raspy, gruff guy, and Sebastian is the sweetheart. So highly, highly recommend it if you love a good, cozy, modern fantasy romance. So, and my next one is completely the opposite. I loved this one. This is Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle. And while Rival Wizards is really cute and cozy, Camp Damascus, obviously by the cover, is a bloody body horror read. Follows the main character, Rose, who is your average neurodivergent, nearly 20-year-old high school senior living in Neverton, Vermont, Montana. Sorry. She goes to school. She loves her parents and her friends. And every now and then she happens to start seeing these horrific monsters, just absolutely grotesque creatures that are wearing red uniforms with name tags. So she's kind of like, that's not normal. And she starts seeing them a lot after her friend Martina is brutally murdered at a high school party. And so she starts noticing these things around town that aren't quite right. Like something's very wrong with her parents and everyone associated with her church, the Kingdom of the Pines. No one will answer questions about the conversion camp that is in the woods nearby, which is the church's main source of income. No one really questions what happened with Martina and is kind of like, oh, yeah, she was murdered by this other boy. And Rose is kind of like, no, nope, that's definitely not what happened. And Rose is coughing up flies throughout the book. So you're kind of like, okay, something is really, really wrong. And while this is a horror book, there is found family and finding love and having like a redemption arc at the heart of the story. And the characters around Rose are absolutely amazing. And this is actually the first book I've read from either author, so I'm very excited to see what else they write. But Chuck Tingle does a great job highlighting some really important issues that are actually going on right now in the world through his horror. And it's just, trigger warning, it gets graphic, but it is great. And if you do want a good horror that has a lot of heart to it, this is perfect. And audiobook, a little love about this. Mara Wilson, Matilda, is the narrator for the book, and she does a amazing job throughout the story. She also apparently narrates one of his other books, so very excited to see to listen to that one in the future. But that is me and my picks, and I'm going to hand it over to Jessica.
All right, thank you, Kelsey. My name is Jessica, and I'm a library associate at the Merrimack Valley branch. And one of my favorite books of 2025 was The Girls Who Grew Big by Layla Motley. The main character of The Girls Who Grew Big is Adela Woods, a pregnant 16-year-old whose disappointed parents send her to go live with her grandmother in a small town on the Florida Panhandle during her pregnancy. Shortly after arriving in Padua Beach, Adela meets the Girls, a group of young women like herself who are either pregnant or already mothers and mostly lacking family support, who spend most of their time in a red pickup truck owned by Simone, the unofficial leader of the group. The novel follows the girls as their friendships evolve, as they become mothers, and as they navigate their changing places in the world. The Girls Who Grew Big is a powerful story of girlhood, learning to advocate for yourself and others, and learning to take up space in the world. The author, Layla Motley, wrote her debut novel, Nightcrawling, when she was just 17 years old. She is also the former Youth Poet Laureate of Oakland, California, and her poetry background really shows in her writing, which is so beautiful. In a passage that I particularly loved, after finding a killer whale stranded on the beach, the author wrote, "Here's the thing about killer whales. Contrary to popular belief, they won't kill you, and they're not even whales. That's what happens to someone when the world decides something about you, grabs hold and morphs you into an illusion of yourself. Suddenly, even your name isn't your own." I cried a lot while reading this book, not just because sad things happen, although they do, but because the story and the writing really resonated with me as a powerful depiction of the particularly vulnerable time in a woman's life when she's old enough to make adult decisions, but also still learning so much about herself and the world. As young people tend to do, the characters make some frustrating decisions that aren't always easy to read about, but it's ultimately a hopeful book about finding your voice. There are three main things I look for in a book: beautiful sentences, interesting characters, and a plot that keeps me excited to see what will happen next. And both The Girls Who Grew Big and my next pick have all three of these things. My next pick is James by Percival Everett. James is a retelling of The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn by Mark Twain from the enslaved character Jim's perspective. Like Huckleberry Finn, the story of James starts in Hannibal, Missouri, where the enslaved Jim befriends a child named Huckleberry Finn. When Jim learns that he may be sold and separated from his family, he runs away and happens upon Huck, who has also run away from his abusive father. The two join together and float down the Mississippi River together on a raft. They are separated through circumstance at times on their adventures, and during these times, the story of James diverges from the story of Huckleberry Finn. Like The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, James is a satirical novel that explores slavery, race, and class in the late 1800s. The satirical angle also makes it fun to read. The characters and the situations they find themselves in are often funny, even as they are dangerous. Mark Twain took great care with language in writing Huckleberry Finn, trying to portray dialects as accurately as possible, and language plays a central role in James as well. Percival Everett is a prolific writer who has written more than 20 novels, as well as several short story and poetry collections. His work is often satirical, exploring issues of race and identity in the United States. In an interview with USA Today, Percival Everett said, "My writing James is not in any way an indictment of Twain. I'm writing the novel that Twain was not ill-equipped, but unequipped to write, that being the story of Jim. So I consider this more as being in discourse with Twain." I read this for my book club at Merrimack Valley, and we had a great discussion about it. Many of us read Huckleberry Finn as well, and we talked about both in our meeting, but I know another book club leader who discussed Huckleberry Finn one month and then James the next, and they had a good discussion with both. James won the National Book Award for Fiction in 2024 and the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction in 2025, so if you like to read award-winning novels, this is a great pick for you. It's also a good read for anyone who likes historical fiction, stories with a lot of adventure, and unforgettable characters who are continually evolving. James is an unforgettable novel that adds an important perspective to a classic story. Thanks for listening to my 2 favorite reads of the year, and I'll pass it now to Catherine.
Thank you, Jessica. Hello, my name is Catherine. I'm a library associate at the Clark Family Branch. My first pick of the year is One Dark Window by Rachel Gillig. I've seen this book floating around for a while, coming in, trapping for holds, and I just never picked it up. I thought the cover looked kind of interesting. I just never had the time to pick it up. And then one day I happened to be on Overdrive and I saw it as an e-bestseller, and I'm like, all right, let's give it a shot. And I'm so glad that I did. The book is tagged as a romantasy, but it was not filled with gratuitous spice or which is often a stereotype of this genre. So I know a lot of people kind of get turned off by that sometimes, but I would not describe this as a romantasy. The story takes place in a mist-locked kingdom called Blunder, in which those that venture into the mist are never seen or heard from again. Our main heroine, Elspeth Spindle, which is a mouthful, grows up in this dangerous, often cutthroat kingdom with the help of the nightmare inside of her head, the monster that lurks in the crevices of her mind that helps her when she needs protection, but also has secrets of its own. The magic system in this book was different from a lot of other books that I've read about that have magic in them. The magic in this book is held by the few characters that possess Providence cards. Kind of think of like a deck of playing cards, but there's only 12 cards, and each card contains a different power that can only be used by the holder of the card. When Elspeth becomes tangled in a plot to gather all 12 different cards to free their kingdom, she must rely on her nightmare in her head and her own wits to keep from having the monster, the nightmare, be discovered by others. This is book 1 of the Shepherd King series, with the second one already having been released. I have not read it yet, but this ends in such a way that you want to read the next one. I'm very excited to start the next one soon. And then my next pick, which is a bit of a turn, is The Indifferent Stars Above, the harrowing saga of a Donner Party. This was actually, by Daniel James Brown. This book was actually in our history and genealogy department's passports. That was one of their staff picks. And I thought it sounded interesting, so I gave it a read. And everybody learns about the Donner Party in about middle school, high school, but kind of just the basics. This nonfiction title dove into the whole ordeal, their whole journey, their whole time being there. But from the perspective of 21-year-old Sarah Graves. Newly married, Sarah sets out with her husband, her parents, and her 8 siblings from Illinois to California in 1846. Several months after starting out, they join with another party led by George Donner and manage to reach the Sierra Nevada mountains just as the heavy snow begins. Unfortunately, there's no way over or through the mountains because of the heavy snow, and while some of the party decide to stay behind and try to make camp there until the snow melts, Sarah and 14 others set out for California to bring help. It took them 32 days, and during that time, they endured death, starvation, freezing blizzards, and had to resort to measures that is what the Donner Party is most known for. This book was a fascinating look at the hardships and the struggles of a party that was started with such hope and wonder, and the lengths that they went for survival and to try and make it and to try to bring rescue and relief to the others left behind. There were moments where I did have to set the book down because it was a hard read, but it was fascinating, and it was so interesting to read more about it than just what you learned about in high school about just, oh yeah, they had to resort to cannibalism and that was pretty much it. This goes into all the characters and all of the background, the details, and just their inner personal relationships and lives. I would highly recommend this book to anyone that's interested in learning more about history and events that happen. Thank you. Oh, and our next up is Trista.
Thank you, Catherine. I'm Trista from the Prairie Commons branch, and my first pick is The Balanced Brain, The Science of Mental Health by Camilla Nord. Nord is a cognitive scientist who leads the mental health neuroscience program at Cambridge. She has some serious research credentials, and yet her writing is very accessible for a popular audience. The Balanced Brain demystifies mental health by grounding it in tangible processes occurring in the brain and in the body. Our brains, Nord tells us, have developed to try to anticipate what will happen next based on what we have experienced before. In many cases, this tendency helps us, but it can also go off the tracks, which can lead to depression, anxiety, and other mental health concerns. For Nord, though, biology is not destiny. Her book explores how lifestyle changes, individualized treatment plans, and emerging treatments can improve mental health by addressing the physical root causes. She respectfully critiques diagnosis criteria that have failed to account for how individual brains differ, and she lays out the scientific evidence with careful nuance and clear understanding of the limitations of what we know about cognitive processes, which are so challenging to observe and measure. If you have an interest in mental health, neurobiology, or simply enjoy reading popular science books, check out The Balanced Brain by Camilla Nord. The information is fascinating, the writing is enjoyable, and you may even come away with an idea or two about what you can do to improve your own mental well-being. My second pick is Dead End Memories by Banana Yoshimoto, translated from the Japanese by Asa Yoneda. This short story collection contains 5 stories that follow women as they navigate uncertainty or crisis. Yoshimoto does not shy away from difficult topics, including themes of tragedy and violence. There's a couple plot points that are kind of happen off the page where there's some pretty tragic deaths that happen, but she doesn't dwell in that. Instead, she gives her characters the strength, hope, and good nature that allows them to endure. I really savored each of these stories, but I particularly loved the first in the collection, titled House of Ghosts, which is the bittersweet story of 2 young adults as their relationship slowly unfurls, but then goes dormant due to circumstances that separate them, and then blossoms later in life when they reconnect. Yoshimoto's writing is somehow lyrical and plain-spoken at the same time. There are flights of lyricism that convey the inner depths of the characters, but also simple, spare statements that get at the bare reality of their worlds. Her stories strip life down to what is most essential and profound, while remaining warm and hopeful. As in her earlier work, such as Kitchen, Yoshimoto infuses her stories with food and cooking. And if you can pair this book with some Japanese takeout, you should absolutely do so. Yoshimoto is a beloved author in Japan, and she is internationally acclaimed. And I don't think I've ever read stories quite so haunting and tender as these. If you enjoy the beautiful, poignant nature of movies like Before Sunrise or Past Lives, then I highly recommend Dead End Memories by Banana Yoshimoto. Those are my 2 picks for my favorite reads this year, and I will pass it along to Miriam.
Hello, I'm Miriam from the Sax branch. My first pick is The Everlasting by Alex E. Harrow. I will read absolutely anything by Alex Harrow without even checking to see what it's about. She doesn't have that many books, but they're all fantastic. Um, and so that's exactly what happened when I started The Everlasting. I had no idea what it was about or what I was getting, which is good because, like one of the earlier presenters also said, this had a romantasy tag in a lot of rating sites, and that would have put me off if I'd seen it before I picked up the book. Um, and I'm so glad that I didn't have that happen because this was wonderful. Owen Mallory, the narrator for most of the novel, is a struggling scholar in a fictional country whose area of expertise is his nation's legendary hero, Sir Una Everlasting. Una is kind of a Lancelot sort of figure, the great knight, who's sort of central to a lot of the legends of the country. And she may or may not have actually lived, right? It's a debate among scholars over whether she was real. So one day, the legendary book about Sir Una that nobody was sure existed shows up in Owen's office. He starts to study it, but after just a few days, it mysteriously disappears. It's removed and replaced with a note directing him to what turns out to be a government office. When he gets there, the government official whose office it is shows him the book. She now has it, but it's blank. And after talking for a bit, and I'm not going to give that bit away, she uses the book to whisk Owen off into the distant past, directly into the path of Sir Una Everlasting. From there, Una completes her final quest, and Owen writes it all down. It turns out he wrote this legendary book. But that's just the beginning, because when they reach the end of Una's story, Owen is pulled back through time to his own period, and everything just becomes more complicated, both for him and for the reader. His time with Una is not finished, and he realizes that the story can be rewritten. And Owen and Una's relationship changes and develops. And as they cycle through the story multiple times, they remember more and more about each other. And as they do that, they reshape their future in ways that they can't predict. This book kept me absolutely riveted. The imagined folklore of this world feels real. It feels familiar without being any of the stories from our world. The time travel works, and that is always very challenging in a time travel story for the time travel to actually work. And the antagonist is a formidable threat with really complex motivations. And there's just the right amount of romance. It's there, but it never dominates the other themes of the story or sort of takes over. You can't go wrong with Alex E. Harrow, and I think The Everlasting is for a really wide range of readers. Whether or not you like fantasy, whether or not you like romance, I say ignore those genre tags and just give it a try. My next pick is Catabasis, I believe is the pronunciation, by R.F. Kuang. Catabasis is a Greek word meaning descent, and it refers to a journey into an underworld. Clearly, I like books that have a bit to do with folklore and mythology because both of my picks play with these themes. In this book, Kuang gives readers exactly what the title suggests, a journey into the underworld. There is very little preamble to this book, like in many underworld journey stories. There's maybe one or two chapters before our two main characters, Alice Law and Peter Murdoch, are thrown into their adventure. They are both graduate students in magic at Cambridge University, and they start on this journey to the underworld to bring back their advisor, the world-renowned Professor Grimes. Alice and Peter are competitors and academic rivals with a really complicated history. And if you were to ask them, they would both claim the reason they're going to save their professor is so they can sign off on their degrees and allow them to like graduate and do the work they want to do. But obviously, they both have more complex motivations than that as the story progresses. Um, so as our story ramps up and Alice and Peter begin their descent into the underworld, we learn more and more about the characters, their histories and motivations, and of Kwang's vision for the underworld. Uh, First off, because of the characters who are going on this journey, the hell reflects them and therefore is a university. It the underworld is taking the shape that makes sense for the people journeying through it. Second, while Kwang uses influences like Dante and Orpheus legends and other Greek myths and Chinese myths, this is not a retelling of any of those stories. It is its own unique tale that just uses familiar underworld travel elements. Um, a lot is going to be familiar here, but none of it is going to be identical to something you've run into before. In addition to complex and interesting characters and a unique take on the underworld, Kwong creates some of the best, most believable magic systems I've seen in fiction. This one, like her book Babel, which I used for this program a previous year, feels like the magic feels like it would actually work in the real world if reality were just a tad bit more fluid. And I love that. I devoured this book and I couldn't recommend it more. And next up, we have Angie. So I'll send you to Angie.
Thanks so much, Miriam. The first book I'd like to talk about is When I Was Your Age by actor Kenan Thompson. But if you're looking for a salacious Hollywood tell-all type memoir, then might I recommend Crystal Hefner or Britney Spears' book, because this one was not that. It was so completely wholesome. I generally read all genres, but I was surprised to find that most of my top picks for this year was nonfiction, and this one rose to the top for me. It stuck with me all year. In the first sentence, Kenan starts by asking, how long have we known each other? And personally, I'm an elder millennial, so I've been a Kenan fan since the days of All That on Nick, and I even had that coveted orange VHS of Good Burger. So reading this book felt like catching up with a friend that I knew from school but hadn't talked to in a minute. The longest cast member of SNL gave a lot of insight into his grueling audition process that pitted him against his best friend, Kel Mitchell. I liked the behind the scenes glimpses at the classic sketches, including Black Jeopardy, and my personal favorite, What's Up With That? And as a theater kid, I enjoyed the costume and wig journeys that his characters undergo before the big Saturday night show. My favorite part was learning about Kenan's adventures in being a parent. He said his daughters sucked the cool right out of him, and he's okay with that. And as a parent, I can absolutely relate to it. I don't care that I'm not cool. He shared his philosophies on parenting his daughters, inspired heavily by the peers he's lost to gun violence, drug abuse, and suicide. Even when writing about some heavier topics like his 2022 divorce, a biased superficial beauty standard, estrangement from his friend Kel, and the bankruptcy at the hands of a fraudulent accountant, he focused on the lessons learned. The author does read the audiobook, which I really enjoyed hearing it in his own voice. But if you go that route, then you're going to miss out on the photos that are in the physical copy. So my suggestion is just read both. My next book is Next Time Will Be Our Turn by Jessie Q. Sutanto. And this is a dual point of view romance. Izzy Chen's family always throws a huge party for Chinese New Year. But this year, her grandmother, Magnolia, who she calls Nai Nai, strolled in arm with a stunning woman named Ellery, and they shared a kiss. The entire family is shocked by this scandal. Nai, through flashbacks, she tells her story, starting with her arrival at LAX as a 16-year-old Indonesian Chinese student. The only person that Magnolia knew was her sister, but soon she met Ellery at school, and before long, they were inseparable. If you love a good friends to lovers romance trope, then this is the one for you. Magnolia and Ellery's relationship was a true love story, but it was forbidden by cultural and gender norms. Magnolia always viewed her as the love of her life, and they truly were soulmates. But of course, there were twists and surprises of both the good kind and bad. I found Magnolia such an interesting character to follow, and I loved seeing her as a younger woman, but then also as a grandmother. The way the book was written was a lot of fun because you can see how Izzy, the granddaughter, is reacting to the details that Magnolia is sharing and sometimes even oversharing. It reminded me of The Princess Bride with Izzy interjecting the way that the grandson does in that story. I think it's hard to believe that our grandparents weren't born the way that they were when we were born. The way Magnolia explained her past opened Izzy's eyes to the fact that being true to yourself is the most important. Definitely check this out if you're a fan of coming of age stories, queer stories, and stories of intergenerational connection. And now I'll pass it along to Kat.
Hello, I'm Kat, and my first pick is I Am the Swarm by Haley Chewins. This is a book in verse about a family of magical women whose powers or gifts always arrive on their 15th birthday. For Nell, who is about to turn 15, these gifts seem more like a curse. Her mother's gift changes her age every day, so Nell never knows if she will have an adult to count on or someone too young to be a mother. And her older sister bleeds music and is consumed with attempting to release the songs trapped inside. When Nell's magic arrives, it is in the form of yellow ladybugs that manifest with her joy as she plays piano. And she is at first happy with this magic, but soon other insects appear to mimic her moods. Creeping beetles when she feels uncomfortable, a rush of gray moths alongside her disappointment, and most terrible of all, a swarm of wasps that show up with her anger and rage no matter how hard she tries to push it down. These groups of insects all appear suddenly and then die as soon as the emotion is past. Nell is left with the dilemma of pushing her emotions down to keep them away or allowing herself her feelings in spite of the swarm. This is not a book for anyone with a phobia of insects. The descriptions are vivid and visceral, but they reflect Nell's emotions brilliantly. This is a beautiful coming of age story and just a phenomenal exploration of what it's like to be a young woman struggling with changes out of your control. And don't let the book in verse scare you off. Novels in verse are often less intimidating than the poetry that they borrow from. My second pick is Sorcery and Small Magics by Miega Ducey. In a fun happenstance, I too have picked a queer wizards at college romance. This one takes place in a magical Regency period setting. In this book, our main character is Leo Vander Lovage, who is a scrivener of magic and has always had bad luck with big elaborate spells. He is now stuck doing charms and cantrips, which is less than ideal at a college of magic. One day in class, a magical mix-up leads to Leo having to obey every command of his nemesis Sebastian Grimm, the most talented mage in school, and they now have to work together, chasing down leads and exploring dangerous magical forests to find a solution before Leo is stuck like this forever. The characters in this book are all quite charming, and I adore everyone. I really like the magic system here, where the Scriveners are able to write spells but not cast them, and the mages are only able to cast spells written by Scriveners. It's a great way to have forced proximity for our main characters without it feeling contrived. There is no spice in this one. It is a slow burn with the majority of the book about Leo and Grimm getting to know one another. It's clever and sweet, and I am impatiently waiting for the next one because this is the first in a series, and I have my fingers crossed that the next one is from Grimm's perspective. And now I'm going to pass you back around to Sarah.
All right. Well, thank you so much to all the presenters. We are coming right up on 7:30, but if anyone has any questions, so I don't want to keep my presenters for too long, but if anyone has any questions, please put them in the chat now, and we'll take a couple of questions at the end, but I want to do a little bit of wrap up. So yeah, these are some amazing picks, but if you want more picks for yourself, you should try out our personalized reading service. This is a form you can fill out on the website to tell us what you like and what you don't. And within a week, usually within just a couple of days, we will send you a list of 5 titles that we've created just for you. You can find that on the website under the Books, e-media, and More tab. And then if you enjoyed this program, you might enjoy some other programs that we offer. Just so you know, we are celebrating Jane Austen's 250th birthday this month. There have been a number of programs all over the library system at every branch. And if you go to our events calendar and you search the keyword Jane Austen, you will see the ones that are still coming up. And then just know a number of our presenters tonight are book discussion group leaders. So if you are looking to join a book group that actually talks about the book, then library book groups might be for you. If you want to find a book group at a branch near you or at a virtual book group, because I run a virtual book group, you can go to our events calendar and then use the filter on the left side of the page to filter to the event type book discussions. And with that, if anyone has any questions, please go ahead and put them into the chat. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to put us all into gallery. All right, so let's see. There is one question in the chat. Let's see here. So someone put in the chat that they were surprised by the number of books focusing on some form of magic as well as those focusing on some sort of cozy. And I'll say I'm not surprised because Harry and I work with a lot of readers. We answer all of the personalized reading services or service requests, and many people are asking for cozy things right now. And when it comes to book groups too, the book groups really love feel-good fiction. I think it's just a response to the state of the world. But yeah, I'm always interested to see because there often is sort of a trend in what people staff are reading this year. If you have any other questions, go ahead and put those in the chat. I'm going to ask all of you just in case you can stay just a few extra minutes. Did any of you read any of the other picks that other people offered? And if you want to say anything about those, I am actually currently reading The Keeper of Magical Things. I really loved her first book, The Teller of Small Fortunes. So, and I'm really enjoying it right now. So I think I'm like maybe a quarter of the way through, but it's fun. But did any of you read anyone else's picks?
I read one of yours. I did Piranesi. I actually used it for this the very first year we did it. And I absolutely love it. And yeah, you're right. You can't really say anything about it at all because anything you want to tell people other than that it's really good gives it away.
I also read Piranesi and loved it. I still think about it a lot, actually. Yeah, it's just such a unique setting. It's a really wonderful book.
I
So
also
I,
read
oh.
Piranesi, but I'll say that I also read TC's pick, Dopamine Nation, and thought that that was a really good pick too. And I liked hearing that somebody else had a Japanese short story collection. That was a nice little dovetail too.
I read One Dark Window a while ago, and I thought it was one of the coolest magic systems I've ever encountered. The fact that like it worked, you have to have the card, and the cards all do different things, and you can have more than one card, and it is the most interesting magic system I've encountered, and it was a really great book.
I have also read Piranesi and loved it. But also I am starting Will Prescribe You a Cat for my outreach club this month. So looking forward to that.
Yeah, I was gonna say I read Will Prescribe You a Cat, and it was my gateway book to other books in translation. So
And I read Automatic Noodle very recently, and I thought it was delightful and very relevant. So,
I totally forgot. I also read Automatic Noodle, and I really loved having like a view into the robots thinking and hearing from them. My favorite was the robot who was a bank teller because I don't want to give a lot of things away. I loved that robot's perspective. Like just hearing that was fantastic.
Yeah, it's they're like both very human, but also not, you know. She does a good job of like think of making these characters like very robotic, you know, like they have a totally different sort of perspective on the world. Okay, we do have a question, well, a comment. Someone says that they are new to a lot of the genre terms that we've used, like cozy. So I will say, cozy kind of started as a mystery subgenre. These are the kinds of mysteries that tend to take place in small towns or other closed communities, like a university or a restaurant, you know, that kind of thing. They generally have relatively low stakes, and the sex and the violence take place off page. But this has kind of expanded into other genres. So there's cozy fantasy, sci-fi, and romance, as well as some like cozy historical fiction as well. So yeah. But this person says that they have enjoyed reading Demon Copperhead James, which is one of our picks tonight, and Chain Gang All Stars, and they want to know if these are part of the same genre. And I would say they're all literary. Chain Gang All Stars is technically a dystopian, but I would say it's a pretty literary, a dystopian novel. So yeah, these would all be sort of literary fiction. So if you're looking for a term to use when asking for more fiction, that would be. And I think all three of these are award winners. So it sounds like you like award winners. Has I think I know for a fact some of you have read Demon Copperhead or Chain Gang All Stars. What did you think of those?
I really enjoyed Chain Gang All Stars, and that author Nana Kwame Adjei, his previous book was a book of short stories called Friday Black, and it's a satirical takedown of consumerism, playing on Black Friday. And he was also, I think, mentored by George Saunders, so it's got a little bit of that kind of feel to it. But yeah, I highly recommend for people who like a little bit of that dark satirical edge to their literary fiction.
All right. Well, I don't want to keep you all over too much more. I know many of you have taken time out of your very busy schedules, and you're coming to me from other locations. And some of you actually have to go like jump back on the desk and like do closing duties tonight. So with that, I will say thank you to all of my presenters for presenting tonight. Some really great picks. Thank you for all of you for attending and celebrating your love of books with us. So I hope that you will attend another program with us soon, and have a lovely end of the year and a happy new year. And we will see you soon. All right. Bye-bye, everyone.